So Patrick, how are you?
I'm okay. I did a 90-minute fresh air interview yesterday, and I talked too much. So that's why I'm talking like this now, because my voice got very tired. So I'm
I
trying to
thought you were
save
just doing
this.
an impression of my character from The Witcher.
It was that as well. Yes, you can hear the kind of modest respect in my voice now. I thought it was more effective than me yelling at you like I did a couple of days ago.
That's exactly what I did with the character. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
So Patrick, we met many, many years ago. I believe it was in 2003. You were casting for The Lion in Winter, and I had been acting for 3 years at that stage. I had my first job, which was The Count of Monte Cristo, when I was 17 years old. I left school 1 year early, and I was incredibly nervous to audition in front of an actor of your caliber. And I went into the audition. I had spent weeks learning my lines, and by the time I got in there, I'd whipped myself into such a frenzy that I completely flubbed the audition. I didn't remember my lines, I forgot how to act, and then I left with my tail in between my legs and called my agent immediately afterwards. You were very gracious. You said, "Thank you very much," and it was clear to me that I was not going to be getting this role. So I called my agent and told my agent as much. And they said, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. You will. There'll be other auditions. You're not going to get everyone. You're not going to nail everyone." And as I was walking down a street in London, I forget which one it was, I suddenly thought, I'm not going to walk away from an audition with Sir Patrick Stewart and have it be a bad one. I'm going to at least try to get back in there because I know I can do better. And so I went back in, and well, my agent arranged for me to come back in. You said it was okay, and then I did another audition, which went far better. It wasn't good enough to get the job, but it was far better. And you gave me very, very kind words, and you said, "I'm so glad that you came back in." And that gave me such strength throughout my career, and I've never forgotten it, because I tend to find as an actor we can judge ourselves incredibly harshly if we get it wrong. And I feel like acting is a skill which doesn't always appear when you reach into that abyss, hoping that you can clutch it and pull it out. And on that day I did not, and then I came back in and I managed to find some space, and you were very, very gracious, and you let me know that I did the right thing, and that meant a lot to me. So thank you for that.
Oh, Henry, that's a delightful story. I think it probably says more about me as a producer than it does about you as an actor. I was, Glenn Close and I were playing the leading roles in Lion in Winter, but my company were also producing it too. And I was continually finding myself in situations that were unfamiliar to me. And auditioning was one of them. I'd had some bad audition experiences in my career. I mean,
Okay.
directors who took telephone calls while I was actually doing my audition. Actually, that happened to me twice. And the second time, the director said, "Yeah, just go on. It's fine, just go on. Yeah, I know what when for a conversation."
Yeah, I'm never hiring this guy. Not this guy. No.
So I always, when I was in the auditioning spot, the audition, I always tried to be as welcoming and relaxed and as easygoing as possible. Because the one thing I learned about sitting behind the table, have you produced or directed, Henry?
I have not produced nor directed. Producing is something which I have my eye on, and I've started to get the itch for directing. I've got a lot to learn, but I haven't done anything yet.
Well, what I discovered, I started sitting in on auditions when we were filming Star Trek: The Next Generation. And first of all, I was shocked by how brusque and offhand my fellow producers and directors were with actors who came in. And I would always make a point of getting up from behind the table, meeting them as they came into the room, shaking hands with them, asking them how they were, a few questions, and then sitting down. Until my fellow producer said to me, "Will you stop doing that? You don't have to make friends with these people." And I said, "But all I'm trying to do is relax them, make them feel easier." But the one thing that I learned, which I tell young actors if I'm, doing a masterclass or whatever, you must realize that when you audition, the people who are doing the auditioning and watching you, they want you to be the best actor that ever walked through the door. That's what we're hungry for. We don't want another disappointment. We want something that will blow us away. So I say, you've already got a head start. They're happy you're in their room. They want you to do remarkably well. Just, hold on to that. And then the other thing about auditions I've always found is, as soon as you've done them, erase them. Because the chances are you won't get the job and you'll just fret about it and be sad. But I thought it shows great balls that you came back a second time. Thanks for that story.
Yeah, whether it was for better or for worse, it was it was a good moment. It was a good moment, and normally I would just forget, but I had grown up watching you with my father on The Next Generation, so it was something which I really wanted to do well in, and I thought I'm not gonna accept that as his lasting impression of me, and I'm glad I came back as well.
Oh, well, yes. Well, I am only glad to be sitting face to face with you, although face to face thanks to technology, not in real life. Where are you, by the way, Henry?
I am in the UK. I'm in just near Reading. There's a studio here which I'm nearby, and I'm using it because it has a better Wi-Fi than my home, or the home I'm staying in.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Los Angeles.
Thank you very much.
We are in lockdown here in LA. I wanted to ask you something. I know that you had, as we would say, a public school, or here they would say a private school education. And do you have any sense at all what impact that kind of education had on your ambition to act and the way you acted, and what I assumed that you were acting on the stage to begin with? Was there any impact? Because I had no education at all. I'm an ignorant son of a bitch, and I've always been curious about someone like you.
I think it did actually have a fairly serious impact. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have gone to a school like Stowe School, which is the school I went to. They had a really good acting department, and
They do, really?
They did, yes. I mean, I don't know if they still do, if it's gotten even better than it was, but there was a full theatre in the school, and there was a very small theatre as well for house productions, boarding house productions. We had house plays every year. We had a senior play and a junior play as well. And I of course, when I was in boarding school, and even now actually, just not a very cool person. And I didn't have a very successful time socially at school. And so acting was a wonderful outlet for me. It was, as children, I think a lot of us have that sense of trying to discover who we are as personalities. And I was struggling with that because what my personality was not considered cool or popular or whatever was down at that time. And so I got to be whoever the character was on stage, and I couldn't be criticized for that, ironically, because all we live by is critics now. But I couldn't be criticized for the character I was, because I was playing a character from a playbook. And so it just was a wonderful outlet for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I consider myself incredibly fortunate, and they were always very supportive. There was 2 casting groups came around my boarding school when I was young. One for I Dream of Africa, I think it was I Dream of Africa, with Kim Basinger, and I got shortlisted for that, didn't get that role. And then the second one was for the Count of Monte Cristo, which I did get, and then I left school 1 year early to go do that. And so that education, the education which really helped, the part of which really helped, I find, was the boarding school element. Because when you get thrown out into the big wide world, and especially in the acting world, you have to accept knockbacks an awful lot. And everything feels like a judgment of your ability and character. And having been in boarding school, having been separated from my parents for a while and used to it, by the time I was out there and acting and looking for jobs in LA and London, it wasn't so bad. I was okay with it, and I wasn't suffering from homesickness at that stage. It wasn't a distraction. It was actually enormously beneficial to have gone through the boarding school experience.
Henry, am I right in thinking from what I just heard you say that you felt comfortable becoming somebody else, and for a short period of time not being Henry Cavill, but being whoever you were playing? Is that what you were saying?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Well, it's extraordinary. Maybe we should do huge research with Equity, because that was totally my experience. The biggest attraction to me to begin, well, 2 attractions. One was that I was no longer Patrick Stewart, who I didn't think was up to much. And the other thing was, because my home life could be a little bit scary at times, I felt safer on a stage being someone else than anywhere else in my life at that time. And it would be great to know if this was another experience that actors had at the very beginning that made the theatre so appealing. People who are not actors say to me, I don't know how you do it. You walk out onto that brightly lit stage and there are 1,500 people all there sitting in silence waiting to hear what you're going to say and do. And I couldn't do that. But you and I do that. And whew, it feels so good to be there. Am I right?
You are absolutely right. It's actually, you've put it perfectly. That's exactly how I felt in school on stage, and exactly how I feel when the cameras are rolling on set. It's an interesting insight to the psyches of actors, the escapism from ourselves. So you were acting in school? Or
I
was
did,
it after
yeah. When I was 17, I went to the Bristol Olympic School. And that was where my life really began, because to be surrounded by other people of my age, I was Robin Phillips, may he rest in peace, the director, and I were the 2 youngest people in my year. But to be every day surrounded by people who felt like me, who wanted to do what I did, because I had been thought of as being a bit weird where I was growing up, because I wanted to act. And to them, my friends, it was just, I was a show off, and that was all. And it wasn't true. There were other reasons. But then to find a whole community and society of people who felt just like me. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've come to love companies so much, whether it's on stage or like doing a show like Picard or Next Generation. We were a company. I continually insisted that we should think of ourselves as an ensemble, and that there wasn't Jean-Luc Picard sitting in the captain's chair, but we were a group who were all united in doing one thing. And does that make sense to you?
It absolutely does make sense. It's something which I'm beginning to experience more and more these days. I don't have a big theatre background. I did a little bit of theatre in school before going into the big wide world and acting professionally. And I haven't really been part of companies before. I've been part of casts and crews on films, but there's a different kind of connection there. It's often only the people who you're doing scenes with that you can really build a connection with. Yes. And I found the older I've gotten, I want to get more involved with everyone else, given the time, of course. I mean, TV is very quick these days, and schedules are very tight. But I do like the idea of the companies. I mean, I come from a big family, and so large groups of people are something which I gravitate towards. And so I do definitely feel that, and it's something which I'm embracing a lot more. The more experience I get, and the less I have panic when I'm on set, and more about enjoy this experience, because it's a wonderful dream job, and it's exciting to act. Don't be terrified of it. Like, go on there smiling and love every second.
Now, you've done one season of The Witchers, is that right?
Yes, one season of The Witcher, and we just started season 2 before lockdown happened, and we're hopefully going to go back soon.
Right. Because that will hopefully strengthen that feeling more and more as you get into a second season and maybe a third or a fourth. You know.
Wow! What is that?
It's the wizard seal. The gin.
Do you mind if I
Yes, you.
take back that bit about my fillingless pie? Take it back, and then you can have your ginny gin.
Let go.
No, let go. You horses! Ah!
With Next Generation, which I watched growing up, I was watching an interview recently, and you had said that initially, when you joined the cast, everyone was doing a lot of joking around on set, and there was a lot of good times, and you were a lot more serious, and it was a lot more of the sense of no, we've got to take this seriously. And then throughout the series, as the show went on, you actually opened up a bit more to the idea of it actually being really good fun. And did you try and bring some of that to Picard, to Star Trek Picard? Because I see a lot more in the way of warmth in the character and lightness in the character.
Yes, I'm not a writer. So although I was allowed, as a co-executive producer, I was allowed into the writer's room, but I would just sit there with my mouth open, listening to these great ideas that would flash backwards and forwards across the table, and then be thrown out of the window. And I want to go, no, that was wonderful. I loved being in that room. I wish that I could have recorded every moment that I sat with our writers. But the only things I think that I actually contributed in terms of dialogue were jokes. Like, okay. we had a piece about one of the other characters is reading a very famous, I think, an Asimov book, a science fiction book, and Jean-Luc Picard. I said, you know, I could never really get into science fiction. It didn't mean anything to me. To have Captain Picard talking about science fiction as though it was an alien concept was something which I really enjoyed. And Tea Earl Grey decaf was my idea as well, because I thought it was time to have some jokes with the character, because there was a lot of grimness surround him otherwise. And I was very reluctant to go back to that franchise. But every day, my satisfaction and pleasure and fun grew and grew and grew. And I am so glad that they came up with the idea, Alex Kurtzman and my fellow producers, and that it was, and they cast the group that they have, because we have a brilliant cast with us. It's and that the story is going somewhere else, and it's affecting all the characters very differently. So there's an unexpected quality about it all the time. But like you, we're just waiting to begin our second season.
I need a secure subspace link to Starfleet Command.
What?
And what's the nearest starbase?
Deep Space 12.
Lay in a course.
And so, coming back as a producer on a Star Trek show, what were the differences coming back as a producer, aside from having the luxury of sitting in the writers' room? What were the differences as opposed to just being one of the ensemble actors?
Having a hand in directing where the narrative would go and being able to contribute personal, private feelings about the character, about Jean-Luc Picard, which would also influence the direction of the narrative. Of course, I was also involved in casting too, which which I enjoyed very, very much. And although it became very difficult because, you know, you see so many, I mean, with young actors today, there is so much talent around, extraordinary talent.
Yeah.
And it was thrilling. I didn't know, I had no personal connection with any of the actors who were cast in Picard, but auditioning them was exciting, and working with them has been even more exciting. Those are the main elements for me of being an executive producer. Also, I do get to hear about things a little bit sooner than the actors do.
Right. You get to have the pages 2 days early rather than the night before.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Issa Briones was absolutely fantastic in the show. What was it like working with her? Because her performances were extraordinary. I thought she brought something incredible to the show, which really worked so well with Picard.
Well, we had a good working relationship. And of course, Issa, in that first season, actually played 3 roles, 3 different creatures who all look the same. Issa is the only member of our company that I asked if I could audition with. So when she came for her final callback, rather than having a casting director's assistant reading with her, I think we did 2 scenes together. And it made such a difference to me to be looking her in the eyes and responding to her, and vice versa. Issa came to us hot from Hamilton. She was in the North American tour of Hamilton, and she's a singer, and and a wonderful voice she has too. But for her, it was a transformation. She came from the stage to a sound stage, from a musical to a science fiction drama. And I think we were all a little cautious and a little uncomfortable maybe to begin with, but it very quickly dissipated, and the sense of kind of fearless commitment to doing the job became what everybody was contributing. She's remarkable.
That's the perfect storm.
She was maybe 19, perhaps just 20 when we auditioned her.
Goodness me, that's a big step. That's a big step at that age.
And the same goes for Evan Evagoria, the Australian actor, who plays, well, he didn't play the little boy, but he grows up to be a man and is brought up with warrior nuns. He had very, very little experience, and it has been marvelous working with Evan to see his confidence grow and his risk-taking grow. I actually do at times feel like a father figure, because they're all so much younger than me, and I am enjoying their contribution enormously.
You said you'd take me home.
Yes, and I will. But we face a powerful enemy. We can't do it without support. Look, You have no choice but to trust me. And I know that would make me angry too, but I understand.
So for you, with Picard, was there anything that you wanted to bring to this character which was going to differ particularly from Next Generation? What were your goals for the character, for the evolution of the character?
I'll try and keep this as short as possible, Henry. During the 7 years that we filmed Next Generation series and the 4 feature films that followed it,
Yeah.
without intending to, Picard came closer and closer and closer to me, to Patrick, so that after a while, there was no place that I could identify where Jean-Luc left off and Patrick Stewart began. They became one. So I didn't have to sit and brood about, what kind of breakfast I'd had that morning as my character before I went on the set. There was so much already at work within me. What I did want, and to the writers, I cited the movie Logan that I did with Hugh Jackman, the last of the X-Men movies.
Yeah.
Where that last movie, Logan, found the two of us in conditions that were totally unlike anything that we'd experienced before. And it was thrilling for both of us because we were continually being challenged in very different ways. So I said to my fellow producers, I would like the same thing. I don't want you to rewrite Logan for me. No. Right. But the contrast between the Picard that I had been in Next Generation and how the 17, 18 years that had passed had changed and affected him. He was now angry, moody, guilty, sad, lonely, all of those things which he had never been before. So without changing the most internal part of the man, he had to be different. His responses to the world were different from what the Next Generation's Jean-Luc had been. And you will understand how much fun that was.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You almost described my character then when you were saying angry, sad, lonely. It's all of these things that Geralt of Rivia tends to be, and it was one of those challenges to play the character in such a way that all of these things came through, but they didn't dominate the character entirely. So you end up with someone who is wholly unlikable.
I'm reading Kirk Douglas's autobiography at the moment. Nearly finished it, and at one point in that he said that he was given a great piece of advice by Laurence Olivier, that no matter what kind of character you are playing, there must always be one little element, and it can be tiny, which makes that character likable.
Okay.
And I saw it in Olivier's stage performances and some of his screen performances too. And certainly with Kirk Douglas, I could see it. That there was an empathic reaction that one had to them, even in the worst possible conditions. And it was because there was this element of likability, I found. Does that make sense?
It really does make sense, absolutely, and it's something which I wanted to give the character, especially in the show, was an essence of likability or connection, an audience connection, because we had in the books, which the character comes from, there's the luxury of lots of inner monologue and long, complex, nuanced dialogue scenes with other characters. And so despite the exterior of this character, or despite the front he presents and some of the acts he commits, you get an insight to who he is, you get an insight to his philosophies, his beliefs, and the way he views the world. But because the showrunner's vision for this show was far more of an ensemble piece, and the characters of Cyrilla and Yennefer drove the story a lot more. And so I had to try and find a way for the audience to connect to my character in the same way that the reader would connect to the character in the books. And for me, it was because we didn't have the luxury of long, lengthy, wordy dialogue scenes with lots of erudite sentences and philosophy. It was, I thought, okay, instead of making the character emotionally demanding by saying how he's feeling all the time and what his intentions are, I said I'm going to draw back from that and make him more of a cipher for the audience to try and crack, because all the other characters, they have origin stories, and they are, as I say, they're really driving the story forward. And every time Geralt came on screen, I wanted the audience to try and work out who he was. He clearly wasn't a bad guy, even though he's done some bad stuff, and he has a very brusque, stony exterior. And so I wanted to try and show that perhaps that was a stoic exterior instead of stony. And the less he would say, the more the audience would think, what is he thinking? And it became more of a performance of reactions to other characters and listening to other characters. And then you have these few moments where you kind of get to get a tiny insight. And hopefully that worked for the audience to think, oh, okay, I have a connection now and I like him because I'm trying to work him out. And that for me was the major goal with my character.
And what about looking so unlike yourself? I didn't recognize you when you first appeared as Geralt at all. And how much of that was an aid into getting inside this? I mean, were they your ideas that he should have this mane of hair hanging in front of his face? You looked massive on the screen. You looked, 7 foot tall and broad. It was extraordinary.
The wonders of good camera work, I think. When it came to the character and how he looks, there are descriptions in the books of how he looks. Of course, there are arguments about what some of those descriptions mean. And there are also, there's a very popular video game series where he has a very particular look. And so within pop culture, there is a certain look attached to the character. And so I drew elements, I wanted to draw on elements of all of those things and bring it to the show. And that really, really helped me. It was about an hour and a half to a 2-hour process every morning before rehearsals. And so it was my work period, really, because that was an extra 2 hours on top of the day. And I would spend my time then really reading scripts, going over my lines for the day, doing the things like working out what my character had for breakfast, that kind of stuff. And by the time I was in my full Geralt rig, as I call it, it was like I was looking at a different person. And I felt halfway to the character just through the physicality alone. I would move slightly differently. And then as soon as the contact lenses went in, it became a whole different thing. My everything shifted, and my interactions were completely different. And the only time they went back to being truly Henry was probably when I was passed out asleep in a chair in my trailer for 20-minute breaks.
I admit I could have better prepared you for Yennefer.
You're under a spell on here.
I wish I was, but no. It's a simple issue of body chemistry.
You're in love with her?
You did a lot of your own stunts, didn't you?
I did. Yes. For me, it was when it comes to that kind of thing, like stunts. I've always enjoyed doing the physical stuff, and working with Tom Cruise really helped, or maybe in the eyes of producers, made worse my enjoyment for stunts, because I really want to do them now, and I think it's an essential piece to the character. For me, Geralt, if an audience is watching Geralt on screen it must be me. They must believe that it is me. And I put a lot of work into how Geralt moves. I put a lot of work into his physicality and each little piece, even if it's a very, very long shot of him walking down a hill somewhere. If it's not me, I feel like I've betrayed the character in some way. And so I try and do, as much as a production will let me, I will do all the stunts for my characters if possible. And I've really enjoyed doing it for Geralt especially.
The fights in particular are extraordinary. The speed with which you move and the assurance and confidence is incredible. I used to love doing stage fights. And then one day I didn't. I worked with an actor who, it was in a production of Coriolanus, and I was playing Tullus Ophidius. And right at the beginning of the play, there's a battle scene in which he comes face to face with Coriolanus. And we would rehearse in a rehearsal room an hour before the show. We'd do it slowly, the whole fight, and then do it at speed. And it was always perfect. And I loved working with this actor, and everything was accurate and choreographed and brilliant, and yet seeming natural. When we got on stage, I would look into his eyes and like red mists had clouded over his eyes. And he would do anything. So, I mean, most of the time I was going backwards because I had to, because otherwise I'd walk into a sword or something. And there was one, there was one night when our swords met, and his sword broke, and the blade went somewhere, and he was left with the hilt of the sword in his hand. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but there is a tradition in stage productions when there are fights that you always put a substitute sword downstage left and downstage right, just behind the proscenium arch of the exit. So, and the rule is, every actor knows it, your sword breaks, you step apart and do nothing. And the actor whose sword is broken will go to the nearest side of the stage, pick up the sword, come back, and we will begin again. And the audience can accept this. Well, this particular night, this actor, his sword broke. He looked at the hilt in his hand, and then he threw it at me. And I ducked like this, and it hit a member of the audience. And there was this howl. I mean, the person was actually hurt. It was not fun. You know? So from that moment on, stage fighting became less and less attractive to me, because I was always afraid I would one day not duck fast enough. I would get impaled.
I was a desperate old man, quixotic, paranoid, possibly senile.
Let's just leave it at quixotic.
And now the windmills have turned out to be giants.
You want an apology?
I want a squadron.
Jean-Luc?
Clancy.
While on set, as much as I do love doing the sword fights, I worked with an incredible stunt person by the name of Lucy Cork for the episode 1 stunt fight, which was by far the most technical. And both of us afterwards had cuts all over our knuckles. Our hands were shaking from exhaustion. It gets to a point where, because you have to throw so much into each piece, and it has to be filled with so much aggression, and you are drawing from so much adrenaline, you start to get to that bit where you think, I'm tired and I feel like it's getting dangerous, but we only have half a day to get this, so we have to shoot it. I can't back out now. We have to do it. And it's a real testament to how talented she is as a stunt performer, to be able to work with her, and any mistakes I made, she would adjust to, and any mistakes she made, I would try and adjust to. And it becomes a real dance, but terrifying towards the end of it. By the end of it, it's just, you're completely adrenaline drained and you just want to stop. And I love doing the stunts, but when it's at the end of the day, I'm very happy that they're over.
The first fight in the first episode, how many characters were you actually fighting? It
It
seemed like a whole soccer team of people.
It was just above a five-a-side soccer team. Yeah, I think I had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the seven in the first bit, and then just the Renfrey character in the second bit.
Yeah. Okay, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Henry, what can you tell me about the Snyder Cut?
Oh, the Snyder Cut, the famous / infamous / all sorts of things Snyder Cut. I can't really tell you anything aside from the fact that all I know is that HBO Max will be releasing it, I believe, and it'll be Zach's final vision for the movie, and I don't know anything more than that. And I'm just really happy that Zach got to realize his vision. I think it's important for a filmmaker and a storyteller to have their vision, their intended vision, released and shown to the world. And I'm looking forward to seeing it myself.
Oh, great!
It's been quite the ordeal, sort of, with all of that. Yes, I mean, with Justice League when it came out, and Zach had to depart because of a death in the family, and then a separate director, Joss Whedon, was brought on, and there was a mix of visions, and the movie wasn't well received. And then over the subsequent years, there was a big push by us to see the fabled Snyder Cut, and now that time has come, and I think it's going to be very enjoyable to watch Zach finally release his vision, as I say.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. And when will we see it? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know when they're planning to release yet. I am just an actor, and so I know these things not necessarily ahead of time.
If we're lucky as actors, a role comes along or an offer comes along that has an enormous impact on what follows, and that impact can go on year after year after year. Did that happen for you with Superman?
I believe it did, and it's something I've always been incredibly grateful for. I've always been a fan of Superman, so just alone having the opportunity to literally wear his boots for a number of movies, and to wear them not just on set either. With a character like that, you carry the mantle with you off set, and it becomes part of your public representation. People, when you meet children don't necessarily see me as Henry Cavill or even Geralt of Rivia, but they might see Superman, and there's a responsibility which comes with that, and it's because it's such a wonderful character. It's actually a responsibility I'm very happy to have, and I hope that I get to play more of Superman in years to come. My life has changed dramatically because of it. It has given me plenty of opportunity for roles, and yeah, it's been one of those characters which changed the entire course of my career, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. And it's also taught me a lot about myself. The nature of the character is so good.
In what way, Henry?
He's so good, the character, and he's so kind, and when you start to compare yourself to him because you're playing him, you start to really look inwards, and you say, am I a good person? Can I be a good enough person to play Superman? And if you ever find a whisper in there which is like, hold on a second, maybe not, then you adjust it, and you make sure you are a better person. And I think that's all we can do in life when as we grow and we gain experience is not beat ourselves for the mistakes we make, but to endeavor to be better people as those mistakes happen.
Well, there was a touch of that, certainly, about both Jean-Luc Picard and Charles Xavier for me.
Yes.
I felt with both of them that they did have an impact like you have described on my private life,
Right.
in that there was a sort of standard of morality and behavior that you needed to uphold, because if you didn't, they would reflect badly, negatively on the character that you were playing.
Absolutely.
I, over the years, have had so many extraordinary stories told to me by people who watched Next Generation. You've now joined the list of them too, which is great. And I mean, ranging from a man who is a police sergeant in Las Vegas, who wrote to me saying how much he enjoyed the show and how much he enjoyed being a policeman. He always wanted to be a policeman and he loved the job, but there were nights when he came home when what he had seen and heard and experienced was so awful that it almost made him despair for mankind and for the world. Mm-hmm. And when that mood took him, he would go to his VCR collection and take out an episode of Next Generation and put it in to be reassured that the world was going to get better. I was so touched and moved by his honesty and the way that he told that. So from a police sergeant in Las Vegas to people who are now important people at NASA who are involved in the actual space program because they watched Star Trek early on. It is extraordinary. And, you know, often we go ahead and we do the work and we love our job and we love the experiences that it brings to us. But then hearing that you have actually impacted somebody's life is a great gift, I think.
It must have been. And did that factor into your decision to play Picard again when it came to Star Trek Picard?
It factored into the changes that had happened to him, because I knew what people were going to see at the very beginning of Star Trek Picard was going to be someone rather unlikable, somewhat unlikable. And I think in a way that's why the jokes became important to me. As well as having to communicate why he was in such bad shape, Jean-Luc, when we first met him, depressed and anxious and guilt-ridden, you know. But my wife is a singer, a musician, singer-songwriter, and I don't think saw a lot of theatre when she was young, although she was trained classically as an opera singer. Mm-hmm. But she has been the first person in my life who actually has commented occasionally negatively on how I bring a character home with me.
Oh, okay.
That something the absorption has been so real and so intense. Just sitting in the back of a car being driven home is not sufficient to free yourself of all of that. And I now have to consciously think about it. I am this woman's husband. You know, I'm not crazy Jean-Luc Picard or Charles Xavier. And that is the most important role that I have to play. So come on, Patrick, get ready for it.
Get ready for going home.
Yeah. Do you have any personal work ambitions? I don't mean particular projects, but is there a direction you would like to go in? I mean, do you think you might at some point do more theatre work? Or
I do love the idea of doing theatre work. When I was very young, it's how my first experience of acting was theatre. I was in the school plays from the age of, I want to say 10. So I do love that feeling of walking out on stage. That sense of that mild panic, which is replaced by elation when it all begins, and I love it. But I also love TV and film, and I think for now, I'd like to remain in TV and film. I'd like to get into producing and maybe even one day directing. And in the future, perhaps, when I'm ready to embarrass myself, and it won't matter when I do, I might try going back to the stage.
Just as you were talking just now, I suddenly had the image of me walking into a room to audition for you. I think I might see if I can't get that, if artificially set up, that it would be actually quite good.
So Patrick, as you were saying, that maybe one day you had this image of you one day auditioning for me. I think it would be wonderful, and I will definitely have it arranged, but only if Sir Ian McKellen is walking in as you are walking out. So you get to cross each other's paths and then wonder.
Well, if as Sir Ian is walking out, I could hear you or one of your colleagues say, "Oh, thank God he's gone. That's good. Now what have we got coming in the door?"
Yeah, this guy's going to nail it.
Ian is a dear, dear friend, and I love him. I am actually in love with him. And we, in the past few years, have done so much work together. I was hugely intimidated by him. We both worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company together, but and he was a star of the company, and I was still making my way up. And I never had a conversation with him because I was too terrified of making a fool of myself. Now, we are, I love being embraced by him and kissed by him. It just feels so fantastic. But we too are looking, we're hoping to try and find something else. There are not many possibilities where you would have two characters that we could each lose ourselves in and connect with again. But I hope it happens.
Speaking of the Shakespearean connection, we have a lot of actors on our show who have experience with theatre and Shakespeare, and Anya Chalotra, who is playing Yennefer, who is probably one of the best actors I've ever worked with, and Joey Beatty, who plays Jaskier, who's a wonderful foil to Geralt. He has a lot of Shakespeare experience. But I've noticed you are doing sonnets, daily sonnets, on your Instagram. What has inspired that? And I often pop in there and look at them, and you have your favorite one, or you have friends reading them, and where does that inspiration come from?
Well, once again, I have to say it came from my wife. One Saturday night, a couple of months ago, we were sharing a bottle of wine, and into my head there floated the first lines of Sonnet 116. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. And so I said a couple of lines, and Sonny said, what is that? I said, oh, it's a Shakespeare sonnet. She said, well, go on, do some more of it. It's a sonnet I know by heart. So I did. And when I finished, she said, I want you to do it again, and I'm going to film it. I want to have a record of this.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. So I did it again, and then she said, I think we should post this. Just put it out there on social media. And I said, it's a sonnet. Nobody's going to care about a sonnet. And, okay, this is a well-known one, but, anyway, we did. The response was overwhelming from so many people who said how lovely it was to listen to those words and to hear that feeling behind them. So we talked about it, and I said, look, we're in shutdown. Shutdown was just starting. When I was little, when my mother would cut up fruit for me, she used to say, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And I said, what if we were to say, a sonnet a day keeps the doctor away? Now, I do not mean to be disrespectful to those poor people who have caught the coronavirus, but that's what we decided we would call it. So I'm doing one sonnet a day, but we've taken a break because what has happened in Minneapolis and what has been happening in other places is so sad and enraging and infuriating. I felt I just couldn't deal with sonnets, not at this present time. They were not appropriate. So we've just called a temporary halt to that. But any day now, we are going to go back to it.
I think Instagram is such a wonderful way. It can be used as such a tool for good and for positive thought. And it's incredible. I used to fear it so much. I resisted social media for years and years and years, where my agents or publicists were saying, you have to get onto social media. And I said, no, that's not who I am. I don't want to put myself on the internet. I'm out there enough already as it is. And it took me a while to realize, but it can be used as such a wonderful tool for positivity, good, great messaging. And I love it for that. And I think your sonnets are absolutely wonderful.
Well, and of the societal good that it can do, there is no better example than that 17-year-old girl who filmed what happened in Minneapolis to George, being his neck being knelt on. The courage of that girl to stand so close to that scene and to show the world what was going on was extraordinary. Maybe the most remarkable thing that I've ever experienced, on social media. Well, look, I want to make a deal with you, Henry, that next time we say hello, it will be face to face. I'm
please.
Pretty much going to be, even when we go. By the way, this morning, the LA Times said that tomorrow, Friday, there are going to be certain relaxing of the lockdown conditions. And it actually mentioned that film, television, and music was included in that. I mean, production.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's fantastic. We are still quite strict over here.
I haven't read the article. I'm sorry, say that again.
We're still quite strict over here. Where things are starting to relax a little bit, but it's we're still reasonably strict.
Oh, well, here too, we're both in countries where it is still very, very unsafe. And, but if it's in the LA Times, it's got to be true.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always true, right?
When Next Generation was announced, when they were going to revive Star Trek, the Los Angeles Times, in the first article they wrote about this, said, and the captain of the Enterprise will be played by unknown British Shakespearean actor Patrick Stewart. And a few weeks after we'd started filming, one day I arrived at Paramount and there was a notice stuck to the door of my trailer. And in big red letters, it said, warning, unknown British Shakespearean actor. Brent Spiner, my dear friend, had got this thing set up, and somebody tried to sell it at an auction a couple of years ago. And I was able to step in and say, that's a fake, because I have the original at home.
You have the original. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just before we go,
it's been great talking to you.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question? Because I'm really
Yeah,
interested
sure.
in on Brent Spiner and Data's eulogy. You said such stuff. It was such stuff as dreams were made on was one of the lines, and was that your influence that put that into the eulogy from The
No,
Tempest?
I never proposed those Shakespeare references, ever. They always came from the writer's room, because
Okay.
I didn't want it to seem that in the middle of this science fiction, I was pushing my own acting history, which
Right.
for so many years was with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But we all loved doing it. I think we did a scene from Henry V, or maybe it was, oh no, it was Hamlet. Data was Hamlet, and I was one of the grave diggers, if I remember, in disguise.
Oh, well, it's been wonderful talking to you, and thank you so much for your wonderful stories and all the insight into all the work you did in that character and for the years you've done. And as you say, next time, I would absolutely love to be talking face to face.
It's a deal. You got it.